matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work. When you go to church. When you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, yeah, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here. We have the greatest level of corporate debt this country has ever seen, off the chart. The greatest level of personal debt, and we have the greatest level of government debt. Our government debt is now trillions of dollars greater than our annual output. That was not the case in the 20th century. It is the case now. What you're seeing is desperation politics. The whole Trump phenomena ought to say to you, wait a minute, these jerky moves that are out of whack, right? In recent days, we have seen the decision of the Trump administration to kiss the war in Ukraine goodbye. We're not doing that no more because we can't afford it. We can't keep funding a war, which, by the way, the West is losing, as anybody who pays attention knows. All of these things are signs of what? Of a country that is in trouble and is turning on its friends because it can to save itself. We're going to take over, we're going to get your energy for nothing. We're going to, make you build the wall, you in Mexico. Look what the genius in a way of Mr. Trump is that without understanding it, because clearly he doesn't, he feels in his own way, the way lots of people do, that there's something that necessitates going way beyond what has been done because our need as a society is beginning to show up. Look, let me give you a simple example. The best electric vehicles in the world right now, but by uniform global agreement, are produced by something called the BYD Corporation, which probably most folks have never heard of, which is Chinese. BYD, the initials, BYD. They make the best quality, cheapest electric car and truck. All right. You don't see them anywhere in the United States. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a 27% tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to buy a $30,000 BYD electric vehicle, which you could do, that's what they charge. That's why it's so good. You would have to pay $30,000 to get the Chinese to ship it here. Then you'd have to give another $30,000, 100%, tariff to Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Don, in the way of a tariff. So it would cost you $60,000, which you're not going to do because you can get a less good Tesla or GM or Ford or anybody else at $40,000 to $50,000, which is less than you'd have to pay. But here's the problem.
I was going to say, because right now this sounds like a good plan to a lot of people. Trump has said, I'm going to do this not just to China, You know,
I'm
although
gonna do it to everybody.
he's going to double existing tariffs to China, obviously.
Right.
But Mexico, Canada, everybody. If we intensify the tariffs, the scenario you just painted will happen, and people will be forced to buy U.S. stuff.
Right.
Which then creates U.S. jobs, which again stimulates the economy.
All right, let me be the economist. Okay, that's good for the Tesla company, which I'm sure is purely coincidental, and GM and Ford and the others. Good. And they'll maybe be able to hold on to some jobs. Good. But now let's follow the bouncing ball, because that's my job as an economist. Yeah. Everywhere else in the world, every company in Asia, Africa, Latin America that competes with an American company that has to buy a truck as part of its business will go to China and buy the best truck at the lowest price, $30,000, the best truck. No American company that competes with them will do that. And you know what that means? Those companies will be able to charge a lower price because they have better inputs than the American company, which doesn't. In the long run, that will lose Americans' jobs left and right as they're outcompeted by all the rest of the world that can go and buy, and is buying, BYD trucks. If you go to Europe right now and you go on the auto routes all over Europe, you'll see BYD cars and trucks. America is shooting itself in the foot. It may be great politics for Mr. Trump. I'm helping the auto companies and the workers. He'll go to Michigan and give us... Yeah, but what you're doing is diminishing the capability of the United States to hold on at a time when its footprint in the world is shrinking. If you take the United States together with the other G7 countries, that used to be the dominant bloc of the world, right? The United States, let's just enumerate them so everybody knows. Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and Britain, okay? The G7, and I'm going to add up all the GDP, gross domestic product, total output of goods and services of all of those 7 countries, U.S. and its major allies. And now I'm going to compare it to the gross added up GDPs of China and its allies, known now as the BRICS. Okay, you add up the United States, about 28% of world output. You add up China and the BRICS, it's 35% of the world output. We aren't the wealthiest bloc in the world. We're number 2. And that's new. And that changes everything. Every country in Asia, Africa, Latin America, trying to figure out who to go to borrow money from, who to go to cut a deal with, who to go to sell your exports, who to go to invest in your railroads. You know where they used to go? Washington, London, Paris, of course. Now they go there.
But they go to India and Brazil.
That's right. They go to Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Beijing, and they ask, can you give us a better deal? And here's the news I got to give you. They get the better deals. And they go that way. And that's not going to stop. And you can rattle your sabers all over the... You put the 7th Fleet in the South China Sea. Isn't going to change that. You've got to come to terms with that, but we are led by people who don't want to do that because nobody wants to be the politician who has to explain to the people it's over.
So you're saying there are continents we don't know about?
Do you think there's just 7? Just 7? That's what they told you. That's what they want you to believe. But Antarctica? It's hiding something bigger. Way bigger. Beyond Antarctica, there are lands we've never seen, civilizations that have been hidden from us. Why do you think access is so restricted? Since 1959, no country has allowed free exploration. No one. You can't just go there, you can't just walk in. That's not by accident. Behind those ice walls, there's technology beyond anything we know, resources they don't want us to have, life forms we've never been told about. And the people in power? They know it. They've been there. They've studied it. But they keep it locked away, far, far away from us. You think the world map they gave us is real? We've been lied to. They keep us trapped inside a fake world while they take everything for themselves.
This is just a theory, not a fact.
Is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents that are slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the south is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there.
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
well,
It was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
Is it any secret? Is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there.
Well,
you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fight over the Antarctic.
And Robert, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Okay, the North Sea. In old maps, for a very, very long time, the North Sea was over here. The South Sea was over here. If you live in America, you know this is now known as the East Coast, and this is the West Coast. Why does this bother me? Because this is north, this is east, this is south, and this is west. Now let's talk about Atlantis. Atlantis is always right here. So we have the North Sea. Now this is called the Atlantic Ocean. But Atlantis was just this one spot. It's everywhere on the old maps. Okay, now I want you to listen to what we used to be able to explore the world, people. We weren't stuck to jobs 8 to 5 and couldn't even, most people can't even get through a day, let alone travel the world in their entire life. But that's what people used to do when we had what they called freedom. So now I'm going to show you what this guy says about the North and South Pole.
Robert, may I ask you?
The thing about Trump is, first of all, he is a symptom, not just a cause. The symptom is a long-term decline of American political institutions. So he's the lagging indicator, if I put it that way, because if you look at the public opinion in the United States and ask, do you trust Congress? If you don't get a huge laugh out of the response, what you'll get is not at all out of the response. Americans do not trust our institutions. Why? They're corrupt. They don't behave according to any proper transparency and procedures. This has been going on for decades. I diagnose this as having two main causes that are distinct. One is the sheer financial corruption of the political system. American politics works by campaign funding. The 2024 election at the federal level was a $16 billion affair. That means that Elon Musk and his friends gave a lot of money to elect Donald Trump.
It's like buying seats.
They buy the seats of the members of Congress. They bankroll the campaigns of presidents, and they say afterwards, we paid for you, now you give us tax cuts, deregulation, special privileges, monopoly rights, inside contracts, whatever you want. So that's one part of American politics. The other part of American politics is that the United States is what the British Empire was for 200 years, between 1750 roughly and 1950. It was the world's hegemonic power. And now the United States has been that for 75 years. That means that the United States acts like an empire. What does an empire do? It uses brute power to get its way. It cheats, it lies, it steals, it manipulates. And that's what empires do. And the United States became an imperial state after World War II. And that means, for example, throughout our legislation is the word emergency, because an imperial state needs emergency rule. So Trump, in all of these executive decrees, is invoking emergency rule. When you think about the United States, emergency rule doesn't come first to mind. You think about Congress and the courts and the presidency. But because the U.S. is an imperial state, there is, in fact, emergency powers throughout legislation. Now, my own view is that Trump is just laughably abusing the emergency powers. What is the emergency that caused him to put on the tariffs? Two. One, he claimed there's an emergency of fentanyl, a narcotics emergency, an emergency. So he upends the trading system with China, with Mexico, and Canada, declaring it a fentanyl emergency. This is bogus. This is not a real explanation. This is probably an inside laugh inside the White House. Then he declared the trade deficit an emergency. Well, that's interesting. The trade deficit has been going on for 25 years. It could go on for a while longer. It's hardly an emergency. It's a feature of our political, fiscal, financial, monetary, economic institutions. It should be addressed by law. It should be addressed by Congress. But he declared an emergency, and single-handedly, he is upending the world trade system. Shocking. Now, you might say, extraordinary. How can this be?
Yes.
And it is the degradation of politics. For example, the Congress really is pathetic. They just voted yesterday to whether the Senate would claim its constitutional authority. And they said no. So what happened was...
This plane behind me, in and of itself, proves that the Earth is flat. Well, this is a Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. Its top speed is 2,200 miles per hour. Also, the SR-71 can fly at altitudes above 80,000 feet. If the Lockheed can fly over 2,000 miles per hour, how much curvature should it count for to stay at the same altitude? Again, to make sure we're all on the same page, its top speed is 2,200 miles per hour. Let's just say there's 2,200 miles between point A and point B. That means that there would be 570 miles of curvature drop between the 2 points of reference. That means the Lockheed would be dipping down 9.5 miles per minute, or 836 feet per second. I don't think y'all caught that. 836 feet per second. But let's just see what NASA has to think about planes flying over the Earth. This is NASA's document 1207 called Derivation and Definition of a Linear Aircraft Model. This report documents a derivation and definition of a linear aircraft model for a rigid aircraft of constant mass flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth. Wait, what? Flying over a flat, non-rotating Earth? As well as a helicopter. A mathematical model of a CH-53 helicopter. The helicopter equations of motions are given in body axis with respect to a flat, non-rotating Earth. Seriously, guys, it's right in your face. But there's only one problem with that. Why assume any planet, let alone Earth, to be flat and non-rotating? Think about it. And they tell us we live on this ball, spinning, processing through space. I would love to hear what you guys have to think about this. Y'all let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, follow me, and share this. Let's get this one out to the people. And like always, God bless. If you guys would like, you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. The link tree is in my bio.
When you look at a Freemasonry organization, it has a depth at the top, and it starts at a third degree York Rite, the old mystical system, versus the Scottish Rite, which is 33rd degree. And everybody else below is just sort of camouflage. And they don't know the true secrets, they don't get told the true allegories. And their goal is to bring in the end time and to wipe humankind from the face of the earth so that we don't reach our destiny to be raised up to be like angels. You know, the handshakes that Freemasons have comes from the Essenes.
Oh, wow.
It may be slightly variant, but it's rooted, and they take that history back to their relationship with the Essenes through the Knights Templars. And so it's a long sort of history. Essenes are the first Western branch of the ascetic monasteries of Hinduism. The Kabbalist is a sister branch of the Essenes, but from the Eastern mysticism that's begat by Nimrod and the Magi after Babel, versus the Egyptian mysticism that comes with Ham and Hermes to Egypt. Then you have some other groups that are in the Middle East operating with the Essenes and the Kabbalists, which are like the Sabians and the Mendeans, and they are all different sects of this Judaic mysticism at that time. And Josephus writes about the Essenes. He understood them, and he wrote about their belief systems, their very ascetic lifestyle. But the important thing that he wrote about is who they worshipped. And they worshipped fallen angels. And they would not give up the names of those angels even upon death and torture. And that's where they say they received most of their knowledge from. So if they're responsible for writing some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, you know, those are not monotheist doctrines.
They have never operated in the world, in fact, like they're even a part of the human family, let's be frank. They have operated in this world like some sort of alien predator that has just come down to drain the sweat, blood, and tears of the human race and to ransack the planet's resources. That's how they've acted. Like they have somewhere else to go when it's all been depleted. I mean, we have to be honest about this. We have to confront the fact that the West has operated with absolute malice, with absolute contempt for the whole world. Not today, not yesterday, but literally for centuries. And there is no remorse, there is no repentance, there's no rehabilitation. Literally the only thing that has changed now, today, is that now their malice and their contempt has made them turn on their own nations. They haven't reformed, they're just repositioning. This is the only difference. There's no change in their character. The A-National OCGFC are not our friends just because they're no longer constrained by nationalism. They're just as predatory and just as vicious as they ever were.
You come from a family that people have described it as a Illuminati family. Is that how you would describe it?
I come from a family that they believe they are descendants of the old gods. They believe that they are carriers of a seed line that gives them the divine right to rule. And that is what gives them justification spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, scientifically to dominate the lesser species known as humans. Humans literally means a lesser species of man. And they do not believe they are a human in the same way. They believe they are something other than. And that's descendants of this hierarchical ruling species that is from the celestial realm that descended in the days of Jared and came down and procreated with the daughters of men, and that they still trace their seed line back to Gilgamesh, till Nimrod. And so this is what the dynastic families believe they have, is a superiority in their genetics on one side and the ability to commune with the divine. And so their children are progenitors of these, some might call them abreactions, mutations, these skills, psychic abilities, that kind of stuff, all variants of it. And so they raise up their children in this path with which involves a tremendous amount of shattering of the soul and the identity so that there's compartmentalization within, and it allows them the ability to train their child up in a way that makes them conducive towards the family. I call them the family. That's what I called them. You know, it's a better word for mafia than anything else. But no, we didn't call ourselves, like, my family wouldn't ever call themselves Illuminists. They're Luciferian, that's for certain. They worship Hallel and Shahar, as he's really known, but different reasons than what people are ascribed to, you know. So on one side of it, I've seen physical beings that are definitely not like our animals up here come out of these spaces from inside the earth. I've seen in deep underground military bases dogmen, like you would kind of describe them, some more humanized, and I think a lot of those were experimentation and genetic splicing. I think a lot of that was gene editing stuff that I've seen. But I do believe that some of these things are holdovers from the old days. They're the last of their kinds, and they've been breeding them, right? And I believe that that's the stuff that's prophesied that's going to come back out and cause the hearts of men to stop for fear of looking after these things that are coming up on the earth. You know, that's why everywhere I went throughout my youth, I could go to these tunnels and these caves and call out, and I could hear them, and they would call back, you know, and it's like, it's a seductive power that draws you back into it.
You could call out to them? Like, was it like a language or a sound or what?
Oh, yeah, man. You can learn to call to them. You can go out here in these hills out here and do it. You can still do it tonight. On these full moons and stuff, you can start calling out. You'll think you'll hear coyotes at first, and then all of a sudden it's a totally different, you know, it's a different sound that starts to resonate. And then it's a different one that calls off from over here, right? You got to understand, some of these guys that you think are just neighbors and stuff, or just people, like, this is what they keep in their barn, you know?
Are they
this is the stuff they keep. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I go out hunting for these things.
You want to kill somebody and you're in the family, right? You mark the target, you mark them. You know, you might cut their ring finger off and put it in their mouth and shove a dagger through it and leave it in their jaw, okay? And you leave that at the scene. That is what's called a message to the masses, that this hit has been authorized by somebody far above your pay grade, and you leave it the heck alone. It happens all the time. There's a lot of murders that happen in this country, all over the world, that will never be on the news. Families. Like, I'm talking to a guy who's a migrant worker, and his family is in the cartel and is a sicario. If you don't know what a sicario is, it's an assassin. Hashashin is where these words come from. And he goes in, he's living in a normal town here in the Appalachians, and his next door neighbor, all of them are murdered. All of them. Father, wife, children, everyone butchered on the table in pieces. That's a message to the masses. That's not on the news. I looked it up. It's not on the news. It's there if you dig. But that's a huge, massive, could be the most unbelievable news story for a lot of these news junkies. It's never going to be there because it's a cartel hit. You got to understand who these cartels are. They're families. Different families, and they are fighting a war, a quiet war. And this is why you have gray men that are out there to do their dirty business, gray women too. But there's stuff that's non-prosecutable in the United States. And a lot of it happens if you have diplomatic immunity. And that's what a lot of these people operate under, the same guidelines of that. I don't have that. I don't have any of those protective measures in place whatsoever, but it was as familiar as breathing to me to go through that world, and that was normal, that murders happen all the time and nobody ever cared. Nobody ever cared, right? But also the vast majority of what you do and you're trained in is to kill people covertly, which means you make it look like something other than an incidental death or an accidental death, as opposed to that's a homicidal death. So a lot of it is learning how to put things in people's body that cause them to die. Maybe not right away, maybe later. And so this is the arts of poisons. And that's why people will turn to the Jesuits to learn that tradecraft, because they're some of the best at it, right? That's what so much of it is, learning how to destroy people's vehicles so they don't work properly, or they suddenly just gas on the way, all the way. There's lots of it involves throwing people off of cliffs and buildings and stuff like that, so that it's the banker's suicide, whatever it may be. That's why the vast majority of the stuff is non-prosecutable, because all of it, if you look into it, or if they start finding where these bodies are, they're going to look like accidental deaths.
You mentioned something several times on this recording that I need to bring up. How do you, I don't know if get around is the right word, But how do you feel what's going on when it comes to you openly, publicly acknowledging the fact that you've killed people?
Now, I had to ask the Father that same question, though, because I said, well, we've been using this other name and getting manifestations. How come we can see things happen in our prayers, and how come, things work sometimes when you use those other names? And he said to me, it's because of who we are. It's because by virtue of the fact that we were made in the image and likeness of the Most High, we are creators. We have the capacity and the ability to manifest things, to manifest our prayers. But if you notice that when you pray and you're not using the name of Yahuwah, you don't get consistent answers. You don't have miracles on demand. And you think about what he said to me. Let me back up. He said that we don't have full access to his power when we don't use his name. So think about that. We don't have full access to his power because the power is in his name. And if we're not using his name and we don't know his name, we are not getting the full benefit, right? So he said to me that we're supposed to be able to pray and see a manifestation immediately. Think about when Yahusha spoke to that fig tree began its death in that moment. And the next time he saw that tree, it was dead. When he said, Lazarus, get up, it wasn't 3 days later. It wasn't 5 months later. It was immediate. Lazarus got up. When the woman had the issue of blood, she touched him. His glory left him and she was healed in that moment. That's how it's supposed to be for us. Yahusha said we were going to do the same things that he did and greater works. But we aren't even getting to the things that he did because we aren't even using the correct name. So if we're to get to the greater works, we have to realign. And all this is about reestablishing and restoring our spiritual foundation because there's cracks in it. The fact that we don't know his name and the body in mass is praying and praising to some name that's not the Father, it's got to be fixed, and it's got to be fixed quickly. We are living in the last of the last days, and y'all see it. We're watching prophecy unfold in front of us. And the fact that we don't know his name can lock us out of the benefit of protection. All of the stuff he says that's in his name, we have diminished capacity. That's the way that I'll describe it. We have diminished our capacity to operate in the fullness of being in his likeness because we don't even know the name of the man we're like or the one we're like. He's not a man. So anyway, I understand your question, and I get it that you've had results, as have I. But I'm going to be honest with you. Since I have found his name and I've been calling on his name, I'm even shocked. I'm shocked at how fast I'm manifesting blessings, manifesting increase, manifesting money, manifesting favor, manifesting. It's because we're supposed to use his name. And he gave it to us as a gift, as a tool, as a weapon to wield in this time, specifically for such a time as this. So I pray that answered your question. Use that name. That's the name that's above all names.